So after school, he would go into the chemistry lab and play in the chemistry lab. And he told me stories how he blew it up a couple of times and how he put together this concoction which almost killed his cousin, but they survived all that.
Welcome back to part 2 of my interview with 89-year-old Mike Blumenfeld. We'll continue the story of how he became one of the most beloved management and entrepreneurship mentors in New York City. As always, listen for an action you can take, something you can do based on the wisdom Mike shares. If you do something this week as a result of what you hear, you'll make Mike Blumenfeld's story a part of your success story. We now continue with part 2 of the interview. I know as a coach to entrepreneurs that there are always some good stories. There's some great experiences, things that you won't forget. Would you mind sharing a story or two of people that you coached? I want to talk about what you're doing now. So if we're talking chronologically, we're not quite there. So I'm looking at stories in the 90s or early 2000s of a client that you can share the story maybe without using their name, but I'd love to hear a couple of those stories.
The one that jumps immediately to mind is probably the biggest and best consulting engagement I ever had, which was in the 1990s. It actually started. Again, one of the consultants that I had relationship with for a long period of time. I went out to play golf with a neighbor of his one day. And the neighbor had a client, it was a consultant, a financial consultant, and he had a client in Indonesia. And to make a long story short, he told my friend that the client was a retailer, and my friend was a retail consultant. And he ended up getting a contract to do some work for the retailer. So he would travel over to Indonesia. And while he was there, he saw that they had a problem with distribution, with the flow of merchandise, which was something that he knew that I knew something about. So he asked me if I would like to bid on a consulting engagement in Indonesia. So I said, sure, what the hell? So I got it. I spent 1990 and 91 going to Indonesia for a month, coming home for 2 months, going for a month, coming home for 2 months.
Wow.
And I did that for 2 years and was hugely successful in my first project there, which was to design a process to make the flow of merchandise flow consistently. It was chaos when I first got there. This warehouse, they had multiple warehouses, and I never got to find out how they were interrelated. But I was given the assignment to improve the flow of product, but you can't spend any money on capital equipment. They would rather hire 100 people to carry a bag up and down a flight of stairs than to put in a lift for $5,000, $10,000. Because labor was so cheap.
Yeah.
So I had to turn my head around completely because labor is not the cheapest thing here in the United States. So
yeah, it's the opposite. It's the most expensive line item.
Right. So I came up with a very simple process. And on my first month there, after spending time in the investigating the whole thing, I came up with what I thought was a possible solution. So I talked to the warehouse guy, the head of the warehouse, about it. And I said, when I come back the next time, I want to set up one section of the warehouse. And the warehouse had 7 different sections: menswear, women's wear, children's wear, home furnishings, whatever. And so the next time I came back, I took one section, and for 4 weeks, we implemented this very simple physical flow. I won't go into any details, but it was very simple. And I'm talking basic simple. It just was logistically, it took a nightmare and just made order out of it. I made it into steps. At the end of the month, I had to go home. And I said to him, just keep doing this for the next 2 months. And when I come back, we'll do another department and then another department until we get the whole warehouse. And so the head of the warehouse said, no, while you're gone, I'm going to do the whole warehouse. I'm going to change everything over. I think this is great. This is going to work. I said, no, don't do that. By the time I came back, he had done the whole warehouse. And we worked on implementing it, and he got it to work 6 months sooner than I would have gotten it to work.
Oh, that's great. As you're telling this story, I'm watching you light up as you're talking about it. The phrase that comes to my mind is, here's a man who enjoys solving puzzles. And that leads to a different question, which is, what do you like to do for fun? Is that the kind of thing that you do for fun, or is it different?
Well, now it's what I do for fun. Mentoring and working with people is fun. So yeah, I do that a lot.
But I'm talking about like a hobby or that sort of thing. Is there an element of puzzle solving in that, or?
Well, I used to be a big tennis bum. So for fun, I would play tennis twice a week until 4 years ago when I had my second shoulder operation, which sort of killed me. I tried pickleball, but that doesn't work for me. So
I haven't given that an attempt yet.
I'm sorry I gave it up, because I think by giving up something that I did so often and so well, I think my body has deteriorated as a result of my not doing it on a regular basis. So I'm beginning to feel some of my 90 years. I do a lot of walking now in good weather. I love to walk along the East River here. People watching and walking is a good pastime. It's fun for me. And traveling, I've had my fill of travel, so I don't travel for the sake of traveling. To me today, travel is all about seeing people, visiting people that I respect and love. And so that's fun.
That's wonderful, which also I think is part of the success, right? You got to be able to enjoy other things. Even though you love what you do so much, I think there's also that power of having something else that you can step away from, be refreshed, and then come back with a new perspective.
And of course, family is very important. And although my kids, one lives in Philadelphia, one lives near Hartford, so I don't get to see them every day or every week. I have 7 grandchildren and now a great-granddaughter.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Did you ever remarry?
Yes, I did. That's a great story, too. When I was going to Penn, my senior year, I dated someone for pretty much the whole year. I graduated, moved to New York. She stayed in Philadelphia. She was going to school there. And called me up one day and said, come on down and take me out for dinner. So I drove down to Philadelphia to take her out for dinner. And she told me that she couldn't see me anymore because she was getting married to somebody else. So she got married. And by the way, we were fixed up by my best friend, who was my roommate in college. I've known him since I was 6 years old. We grew up together in Forest Hills. So he ended up marrying her cousin. So over the next 28 years, I heard about Jane and her husband through my best friend who married her cousin. Jane's husband was killed in an airplane crash in 1980. And when I heard about it, I called her on the phone to pay a condolence call. And 2 years later, my wife passed away in 1982, and Jane called me to pay a condolence call, but we never said anything other than sorry about it. And a couple of months after my wife passed, my friend called me up and invited me out for dinner. So I went out and went to meet him, and I get to the meeting place, and who's there but Jane? He invited her at the same time, didn't tell her, didn't tell me. I said, what are you doing here? And she said, what are you doing here? We were married a year later. So
Oh, that's a lovely story. I'm a huge fan of organizations that use entrepreneurship as a tool to help change lives and make the community better. And I know that that's a big part of what you do. In addition to consulting large businesses, you also consult lots of small businesses. Talk to me about the organization that you're involved in and how you spend your time helping emerging entrepreneurs.
When I started my own business, I found out early on that most of the people who needed my services couldn't afford them. I found this organization, American Women's Economic Development Corporation, AWED, who trained women entrepreneurs. They were the only organization I had seen that did that. And they had a program to teach women to become entrepreneurs. And I started volunteering to teach some of these workshops. And I got really into it and really involved and started working with some of the women who were starting businesses. Some years into it, they asked me to join the board. So I joined the board. And make a long story short, in 2005, that was 1985 is when I started. 2005, they decided to go out of business, so they closed down. And a couple of days later, I got a letter from Workshop and Business Opportunities letterhead that said, now that you have nothing to do, meaning that the organization had closed down, take a look at us.
Mm.
I took a look at them and I loved what I saw. This organization goes into the Bronx, Bed-Stuy, Harlem, and they teach people there how to start businesses. So I started volunteering for them. And sometime after, they asked me to join the board, and then later I became board chair. But I'm still active. I'm still on the board. And as a matter of fact, tonight I'm teaching a workshop. And over the years, I've actually led workshops for hundreds of different businesses. So there's story after story of just wonderful stories of people whose lives have been improved by this.
When someone comes to you and says, I'm thinking of starting a new business, I want to, because I think a lot of people have that dream, but not many people actually attempt it. When they do attempt it, what would you say is the biggest mistake that people have, or the perspective that they have that isn't helpful that they need to change?
First of all, they don't have a clear idea of what their business really is. They think they have a product or a service, and they try to sell that product or service. Trying to sell something without understanding how the customer is going to use it and benefit by it is a common mistake that I think is made every day. But it's deadly. It becomes the difference between selling something that has no meaning and selling something that's going to make a difference in someone's life. So if you sell a product or service, you're selling something. You're trying to get somebody to buy something. With entrepreneurship and with successful businesses, it's all about finding what the customer needs and then finding a way to give it to them so that they can say, wow, I really want to continue doing this. So that's what successful business is all about, is filling the need.
Yeah. My perspective when I'm helping a lot of emerging entrepreneurs, we're talking about someone who wants to start a business to just pay the bills. My perspective is that service businesses are usually a better place to start because they have lower overhead. Would you agree with that perspective or disagree with that?
Well, obviously, anything with a lower overhead is going to be easier than something with a high overhead. I mean, that goes without saying.
Obviously, you have a background in retail. Have you seen a lot of successful businesses that are based on that or based on a food cart in New York, that sort of thing? What I'm asking is, what sort of patterns have you seen for these economic development businesses that usually works out best?
What I recommend for anybody is to take something that you're passionate about and find a way to make money at it. So, for example, a lot of these small businesses have something to do with food, with cooking or baking or some specialty kind of food. Obviously with services, whether it be technical services or cleaning services or you name it, any kind of service, landscaping service.
Why does passion matter?
There's a difference between going to work and picking up a check at the end of the day and just doing what you have to do to get that check and try to get away with as much as not doing it before they don't give you the check, versus someone who goes into work saying, oh, I want to be here. I enjoy being here. I want to contribute to this. I want to make it better. It's the difference between a manager having to watch people to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do versus a manager who can tell somebody what he needs done and then just checks on the results to make sure that they stay in line. It's a totally different job. If you have to keep watching what somebody is doing to make sure that they're doing it, you've got a problem. You're not going to have a successful business.
Yeah. I find too, with people I've coached and also with myself, the passion gives you more endurance and more longevity. And what I mean by that is every job has a part of it that no one wants to do. Even the best, most favorite job in the world, there are moments that you're like, I do not want to deal with this. As a public speaker, I don't like the contract part of things, right? But if you're passionate about it, you're willing to put up with that because you love the other side of it so much that you're willing to work more and do more because you love the other side of it so much.
Yeah, if you're in a business and the business is to find out what the customer wants and find ways to give it to them better than anybody else, this is a constant process. This is not a one-time thing. So the more people are continuously thinking about new and better ways to make things better, that's what success is built on. I mean, that's what it's all about. If you have somebody who just comes and does the same thing day after day after day, that's not success. And it's not fulfilling for the person.
I love that. Yeah. The passion causes you to think more about how to do it better and how to serve people better. I like that perspective. That's great. So you're doing this, helping small emerging businesses, but you're also mentoring some pretty big businesses. Can you talk to me about one? I know that there might be non-disclosure things, but is there one that you can talk to me about and give a little detail on the story behind it?
Yeah, the story of this biotech company that I'm involved with. It started in 2010. Well, it started before that. This young man grew up on a vineyard. His grandfather was a biochemist and developed the process for making wine. And they had a vineyard and a winery. And his family lived on the farm. And his grandfather said to him when he was in public school, "You're smart. You like science. I'm a biochemist. I have this great chemistry lab. Go play."
Mm.
So after school, he would go into the chemistry lab and play in the chemistry lab. And he told me stories how he blew it up a couple of times and how he put together this concoction which almost killed his cousin, but
Oh.
they survived all that. And when he was in his teens, he got interested in polymers. And so he started mixing some polymers together and came up with this very sticky stuff, which had no meaning to him. He didn't know what to do with it, so he forgot about it. Fast forward, he's now a freshman at NYU, and one of his professors gives him a homework assignment. And the homework assignment is, "You've just been hired by Batman." And Batman comes home every night with gunshot wounds and stab wounds and bruises from fighting all these bad guys. So you have to invent something that'll heal him quickly. So he says, "Oh, that's sticky stuff. Maybe I could do something with that." So he writes a paper on this sticky stuff and he gets an A on it. And the professor says, "You're onto something." So he heard about the business plan competition and he got a couple of his friends together, one from the business school, one from the communication school, and they entered the business plan competition, which is where I met him. And I coached the team through the business plan competition. And as I said before, they came in second. They didn't win. But he kept working on this all through college. And when he graduated, he said, "I'm still into this." So he started expanding it. Then he raised some money from friends and family, and then he started raising bigger money, and he rented space, and he is where he is today. We just got FDA approval for one level of product we're selling to the veterinary market, and I'm hoping in the next several months to get the second level FDA approval, which will put us into the big leagues.
That's fantastic. And how much funding have they received to date for that?
About $100 million.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what I like about that is it ties back to what you were saying about passion, right? Here's a man who's passionate about this polymer and what he was doing so that he continued to work on it, even though he was given second place. That didn't matter at all because he knew that he had something he was passionate about. It kept pursuing it.
Just watching this young man evolve over the 13 years that I've been with him has been an amazing process. Seeing this shy, young, inexperienced kid turn into this one of the best CEOs I have ever worked with. He's just amazing. He is totally amazing.
And I know you're not going to brag about it, but I'm sure that he's developed into that CEO to a large degree because of your influence and because of your mentorship.
Oh, he's gone way beyond whatever I was able to give him.
That's what coaching is, though, isn't it? Is that you want them to go beyond what it is that you're able to give, but that influence, those conversations still have part of an influence on that development.
Oh, yeah. And we've become family. He got married a little over a year ago, and I went to the wedding, and yeah, it's lovely.
So here's the loaded question. What do you get more joy and satisfaction from, the large businesses or the small businesses that you mentor?
Yes.
Both is the answer.
Both. I got to be honest, the small businesses give me much more pleasure because I see the difference I can make in somebody's life.
Mm.
In addition to Hustle 2.0, part of the work that I did with Workshop and Business Opportunity, we had a program for previously incarcerated people after they get out of prison. So I've worked with some previously incarcerated people for them to develop a business. Watching them change and develop and evolve and grow has been just a wonderful experience, as has been just dozens, hundreds of companies that I've seen blossom over the last 25, 50 years.
Well, I can tell you're passionate about it, and that has such a huge influence. And when you help someone develop a business like that, you're not just helping one person. You're helping their family, you're helping the community, you're helping everyone that they hire. It's really, really deep influence when you do that.
Yeah. And with the small businesses, there's just so many more of them. And the success rate is so much higher than the big businesses. People ask me, what's the success rate of these businesses? And I would say that the big ones is less than 10% succeed in being whatever they intended it to be. But in the smaller businesses, many of them start out as a gig. It's an addition to a job. So they start off with something they're passionate about. They do it because they love doing it, and it picks up a couple of extra bucks. And then slowly but surely, or sometimes very quickly, it takes over their whole business.
Yeah. It's a joy to see that kind of development and that kind of growth. Well, Mike, I could talk to you for hours. And I know you're the kind of generous guy that would do that, but I'm going to wrap things up. But we always wrap up with a couple of things. First of all, I always like to ask my guests, 5 years from now, what do you want to be doing over the next 5 years? Anything that you would change? Anything you want to add to your horizon, or just continue doing what you're doing now?
At my age, 5 years from today is a whole lifetime.
Yeah.
I'll be happy if I'm still doing what I'm doing now. I couldn't ask for more.
Well, thank you for the positive influence that you're putting into the world and how you're changing people, and that how you're using that knowledge of over 89 years to better the lives of others. That's very noble. Thank you.
Yeah. I learned early on that I can't change the world, but I can change the world for an individual.
Yes.
Or I can help change it and make it better for an individual. And seeing that happen and watching it happen and enjoying every moment of it happening is really part of what makes me go.
Mike, I'm actually getting a little emotional here because what you're doing right now is where I want to be when I'm 89. I try to do that now with what I'm doing. I have a sign on my wall that says change one person's life today. So I admire what you're doing. You're the kind of person I aspire to be. So thank you for your example.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's beautiful.
So the one thing that we do for every episode is we sum up with action items. So a big part of my philosophy, especially with this show, is that I want people to not just hear, not just gain knowledge and be entertained, but what are they going to do? What action are they going to take based on what they've heard from your story? And the goal is that if they do one thing based on your example, they'll make your success story a part of their success story. So what I'm going to do, Mike, is I'm going to summarize 3 action items that I picked up. I was making notes as you were talking. 3 things that someone might do this week, not a month from now, not a year from now, but a real concrete thing. I'm going to share those. And then I'd like you to add 1 or 2 that you would put to the list of something practical, tactical that someone can do immediately. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. So the first thing, I'm going to go with the priority of the family. That even early on in your career, in the 50s and 60s, when people were really working very, very hard, long hours, you still made it a point to be there for your family. And for someone listening to this, I'm going to use a very broad definition of family. I'm going to include your friends, your relationships, the key people in your life. Make them a priority. You can ask yourself with your schedule, Can you carve out time for the people that you love and who love you? Can you put that as a priority and structure things so that, like Mike, you at least on the weekends take your kids somewhere, or you're there to coach the Little League team? Just ask yourself, is there an opportunity there to prioritize your loved ones a little bit more? The second principle here, and this is something that I hear from almost every single guest, it's networking, and making sure that networking is a part of what you do. And you don't have to be an entrepreneur to make it a priority. Participate in events where people go. Participate with the people at work and build those relationships, because you never know which contact, which relationship is going to not only help you, but it'll put you in a position where you can help someone else as well. So make networking a priority. And then it's going to be hard to put this into an action item, but I want to highlight that story of your stepmom talking to you, Mike, Mimi talking to you, and talking about how respect is earned. And the way that you said it's earned is essentially doing what you say you're going to do. So think about a way that you can earn someone's respect so that you can do the things to deliver on what you said you would do, and make that a priority to earn the respect of those around you. I really love that principle. Mike, what's an action or two that you would add that someone can take based on this discussion?
I've learned that there are all kinds of people. People who wait for things to happen, people who let things happen, and people who make things happen. What I've learned is that the first two, you live a life of chance, and you live a life based upon what other people make happen. Once you take charge, once you make the decision to make things happen, it takes on a whole new life into every aspect of your life. And I'll give you an example. One of the things you asked me was, what quirks do you have? What things that you do over and over again? I have this thing that it's just become part of my regular day's job, my work. When I meet somebody, when anybody meets somebody, what's the first thing you say is, "Oh, hi, how are you?" 999 times out of 1,000, people say, "Yeah, I'm fine." And my response now is, "I'm sorry." And they look at me and say, "What are you sorry about?" I said, "You're only fine? What's it going to do to make you great?" Because when they ask me how I feel, I say, "I'm terrific," or "I'm fantastic." And they look at me and I say, life is an attitude. It is what you want it to be at that moment. So you can choose to laugh. You can choose to cry. You can choose to be depressed. You can choose to be happy. And every time I say that to them, "I'm sorry that you're only fine," 99 times out of 100, I'll get a smile. And I say, "You see, for that 1 minute, you smile because of an action that I took. Why don't you take an action to make yourself smile?" So, yeah, it's become part of my shtick of just showing people that you have control on your life. And life is all about decisions. It's all about priorities. And you should be in control of your priorities. You should set your priorities.
You can be the person who makes things happen.
Right.
I love it. Thank you so much, Mike, for your generosity and allowing us to learn from you today.
My pleasure.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. Remember, it's not so much about the knowledge that you heard or what you heard about Mike's story today, but it's what you do about what you learned from his story. So go be someone who makes things happen. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show, hosted by my dad, Dave Crenshaw, and produced by Invaluable Incorporated. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bedez. Sound editing by Mark Lamerjazy. Voiceover by me, Darcy Crenshaw. And the music is by Ryan Brady via Pond 5 Licensing. Please subscribe to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. If you have a suggestion for someone my dad might like to interview, please send it to guest@davecrenshaw.com. And please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. See you next time.